Hi sewing friends, this is Janae King and welcome to block number 10 of Cabin by the Lake at Whitlock Sewing back in Salem, Oregon. This video is specifically dedicated to all those women who were at the Whitlock's Block of the Month. I just want to say thank you for joining me in this year-long process of making Cabin by the Lake. I know it was probably overwhelming in the beginning, and I just want to say good job on sticking it out and going through the process and learning the steps. And it's okay if your quilt isn't quite done yet. I just say keep at it, don't give up, just keep going. Don't stick it in a closet and hide it away, because it's a beautiful quilt and it definitely deserves to be shining somewhere in your home. So a little later on I will show you my finished quilt. I have it all finished except for the binding. So I took it down to Will and Bees to have them quilt it, and they did a beautiful job. And Will and Bees is located in Salem, Oregon, and they would love to quilt your quilt for you if you would like that. Let's go through what was in your kit this month. So the first thing that you should find in your kit is 3 pieces of paper, and one is going to be the instructions for making the flying geese block, and the next one is going to be how to put your borders together, and the last one is really just the last page of the pattern. So once you have all of these 3 pages, then you will have the whole entire pattern for Cabin by the Lake, so you can make it again. Okay, so you also are going to have a really big piece of navy blue. This is 2 3/4 yards, and this is enough for your borders and your binding if you choose to use this for your binding. You also will have a little piece of kind of a pinky batik, and you'll just set that aside because I'm going to explain what this is for a little bit later. You are going to have a stack of fabrics that are all 4 inches wide by the width of the fabric, and let me go through the colors really quick. Okay, so what you'll want to do is pull out this sheet, and this was the very first sheet of your pattern. This gives you the colored photo of what the quilt looks like. And so what I'm going to do is, going clockwise around the border, I will show you which fabrics go where in that picture. So when you pulled these guys out, they should be in order of how they will go clockwise on your quilt in the borders. So the very first, so I'm going to pop this up again, the very first fabric at the very top for the top border, you're going to start with this light pink batik. Okay, the next fabric going around clockwise, so I'm going to go over here. So it's going to be on the right side. If you're looking at the quilt top, it's going to be the right side. The next fabric will be the dark purple. Then if you go down, it's going to be the red, which this is kind of a rusty color. And then at the bottom of the quilt, you'll have a you'll have a medium green, then a dark green, then a light green. This is pretty light, and I know on the video it probably even looks like gray, but it does have a hint of green to it. And then the last one will be a light purple, and the light purple will finish up over here on the left side of your quilt top. All right, and then so that gives you 7 fabrics for the 7 different colors of flying geese on your quilt top for the borders. So I want to explain what this little piece is for, and I have to apologize right off the bat. because I cut one of these strips wrong, and it's going to be the very first color in your pile, which is the light pink. You are going to pair it with this light pink, the little square that I gave you as extra. Okay, so this color here, if you're looking at your pattern to make the flying geese, this color is considered the lightest blue. I should have cut this for you at 6 inches by the width of fabric, and I wasn't even thinking, and I cut it at 4, just like all the rest of them. So that's why I threw in this little piece of extra. So the pattern says to take this strip and trim it down to 4.5 inches. Well, you can't, because it's already 4 inches, and you can't cut it down to 4.5. So what you're going to want to do is cut this to 2.5 inches and then go the lengthwise to get your 4.5. Out of this strip, you should get 8 2.5 by 4.5 inch pieces. And then out of this little guy, you're actually going to get 2 2.5 inches by 4.5 inch pieces. That will give you 10 pieces at 2.5 by 4.5 to make the top border of your flying geese. So I want to go over how the borders are put together, and I'm not going to go into depth too much, because I feel like the pattern actually is really good at explaining how the borders go on. So before you can put your borders on, you have a few flying geese to make. So I have made one here out of paper. It's a little bit bigger than what you'll be making for your borders, but I wanted you to see how they go together. So this piece right here will be the colored piece of fabric that you use. The corners will be the dark navy blue. This will be the 2.5 by 4.5 inch piece. These will be the 2.5 inch squares, I believe. Don't quote me. Double check your pattern. First, you want to make a diagonal line on your square fabric, and then you're going to stitch on that line, and then you're going to fold it back, press it with an iron, and then you will fold it down and trim to 1/4 inch. So it's going to look more like this, and you will not have that bulk of that corner left on there. You will have trimmed those so that when you fold it back, it'll just be one layer of fabric, and you'll want to press those, and then you'll just sew those together and make rows of the flying geese block. So what I recommend is just reading through the pattern very carefully and understanding how the borders are supposed to go on. So I have a strip of paper here just to demonstrate the way the pattern is written, and I want to make some sense of it. So what the pattern says to do is take strips 1.5 inches out of your dark navy blue and stitch those on one at a time so that you have a small 1 inch border all the way around your quilt. Well, then what they want you to do after you get the 1.5 inch border put on, the next border would be the border with the flying geese. I've blown this up a little bit so you can see it. And then after you get your border on with the flying geese, so you're adding that to the 1.5 inch strip, they want you to put another 1.5 inch strip all the way around the quilt. So you actually are putting on 3 borders. Well, to simplify things, I sewed the 3 strips together before I sewed them onto the quilt top. And it made life so much easier and simple. So I cut the pieces exactly what the quilt pattern has called for, but then I sewed these 3 strips together, and then I sewed them to the quilt top. It's just so much easier than sewing one strip on at a time, because sometimes sewing on a 1.5 inch strip to a quilt can actually make it really wavy and it won't lay flat. So my recommendation is that you sew all 3 of the borders together. So let me show you again what that looks like. So all 3 borders together, the 1.5 inch strip, the strip with your flying geese, another 1.5 inch strip, and then sew that to your quilt top. So the pattern is written so that you are cutting your border strips exactly the length that they're needed to put on your quilt. But here's the issue. If your quilt is just slightly bigger or smaller than her measurements, then it's going to be off a little bit. So what I recommend is cutting your border strips just a couple inches longer than what you need them to be, and then you can always trim them down. So there is a little trick that will make sure that your border strips are the correct size, and that is by taking the border strips, putting them on through the center of the quilt and trimming at the bottom and the top so that that strip is the same size as your quilt top through the middle. And then you scooch that strip that you've trimmed over to the edge and you pin it on, making it fit. So what that means is you'd pin at the top and at the bottom, matching those edges. So you'd match it here, match it at the bottom, pin, and then you pin in the middle of your quilt, and you pin and you pin and you keep pinning until you've evenly distributed all that extra fabric between the 2 edges of fabric. So I hope that makes sense. I'm sure you are all pros and have done that before. But what that does is, excuse me, what that does is it brings the quilt top back to the size that it's supposed to be, and it won't stretch those edges and distort the quilt corners and make them wavy. Here's a look at the quilt. It's all finished. I had it quilted, and I'm so sorry that I can't get a picture of the whole thing, but I am going to zoom in so that you can see the quilting. I ended up having it quilted with a variegated thread. It had purples and blues in it. So you can see that in the white area up there, it shows up. You can see the thread, but as we go down to some of the darker fabrics, it blends in really nice. I had the quilters do an all-over pattern that's the same. I did not have them concentrate on stitching each quilt block. They just did an all-over pattern because I like the symmetry of it, and I think it turned out really, really, really nice. I'm so happy with it, and I cannot wait to have it on a bed in my house. Well, can you believe it? I think that's it. We have finished Cabin by the Lake. It has been a very fun process. I've enjoyed every bit of it, and I really can't even believe that we're coming to the end. I want you to know that this has been a great class for me. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed you. I've enjoyed being together and meeting each month. And I just encourage you to keep on sewing, keep on creating, keep on making, and I will be teaching other classes, and I would love to hear from you. So definitely, if you want to contact me, leave me a comment down below, and I would love to hear from you. If you have questions, I can help you with that. I will definitely respond. So thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.